She saw him step into that room full of strangers, calm, confident, completely in control, and in that exact moment, everything inside her shifted. This wasn't heartbreak, this wasn't grief, this was something far more overwhelming. Because the young man standing under those bright lights didn't look like the little boy she once knew. And for a split second, she had to ask herself a question no parent is ever ready for. When did he become this person? Terri Irwin has endured the kind of life most people can't even imagine. Losing Steve Irwin, raising 2 children in the public eye, and carrying forward a legacy that the entire world feels connected to. She's handled grief, she's handled pressure, she's handled responsibility. But nothing quite prepared her for this moment. Because what she saw in her son wasn't just growth, it was transformation. A quiet, powerful shift that had been happening right in front of everyone, yet somehow almost no one truly noticed. Most people still picture Robert Irwin as that cheerful little kid, wide smile, full of energy, following his dad through the wild, fearlessly handling animals twice his size. That image stuck, and the world never really let it go. While headlines focused on honoring Steve's legacy and watching Bindi Irwin grow into her own spotlight, something much quieter was unfolding in the background. Something easy to miss. Robert wasn't just growing up. He was becoming someone entirely new. Born on December 1st, 2003 in Queensland, Australia, Robert entered a life already surrounded by cameras, expectations, and a name that carried enormous weight. Then, before he could even understand it, everything changed. In September 2006, at just 2 years old, he lost his father during a tragic incident at Bat Reef. 2 years old. No real memories, no personal moments to hold on to. Only stories, old footage, and the way people's faces soften the moment they hear his last name. That kind of loss doesn't look loud. It doesn't always show itself, but it stays. It grows quietly beneath the surface. For years, the world saw his smile, his confidence, his natural connection with wildlife. But what they didn't see was the weight he was learning to carry. Growing up in the shadow of a legend you barely remember is a different kind of pressure, a different kind of grief. And while no one was really paying attention, Robert Irwin was slowly, steadily becoming someone the world wasn't ready for. Terri has only ever shared pieces of those early years, scattered across interviews, always careful about what she reveals and fiercely protective of her children. She once described the time after Steve's passing as a blur, like being thrown into a life she wasn't ready for, where she had to run a zoo, raise 2 kids under constant public attention, and still show up strong every single day. But even in that chaos, she noticed something unusual about Robert from the very start. He wasn't just tagging along. There was a spark in him, something that both amazed her and quietly unsettled her at the same time. He didn't just watch animals from a distance. He connected with them in a way that felt instinctive. No fear, no hesitation, just a natural comfort that didn't need to be taught. It wasn't even bravery in the usual sense. It looked effortless, like it was part of who he was. By the time he turned 4, he was already appearing on television with his mom and sister, and people quickly began to notice what Terri had been seeing for years behind the scenes. This wasn't a child trying to impress anyone. There was something deeper going on, something that couldn't be explained as practice or imitation. As time passed, that feeling only grew stronger. What once seemed like small similarities started becoming harder to ignore. And there's something no one really warns you about when raising a child who lost a parent so young and so publicly. One day you start seeing that parent in them, not in a symbolic way, but in a way that stops you in your tracks. Terri has spoken about those moments, when Robert says something, moves a certain way, or lights up while talking about animals, and suddenly the line between past and present blurs. She's admitted that there are times when it feels like Steve is right there again. And those moments hit her deeply because they bring 2 emotions at once, happiness and heartbreak, so tightly connected that she can't separate them. But it wasn't just about personality. As Robert grew older, people began to notice how much he physically resembled his father. It wasn't subtle anymore. The same energy, the same presence on camera, the same fearless way of handling animals that would make even professionals hesitate. Longtime fans started saying that watching Robert felt like watching a young version of the crocodile hunter, not because he was copying anything, but because it came so naturally to him. For Terri, watching this unfold hasn't been simple. Around 2024, Robert began speaking more openly about his father, and what he said surprised a lot of people. He didn't just talk with admiration, he spoke with depth. He reflected on what it meant to grow up knowing his dad wasn't just his father, but a global figure who meant something to millions of people. He talked about feeling lucky, but not in a casual way. It was clear he had really thought about it, struggled with it, and come to terms with it over time. Beneath his gratitude, there was still grief, and he didn't try to hide it. For Terri, hearing him express all of that so honestly at such a young age was another one of those emotional collisions where pride and pain arrived together. And slowly, the world started to see it too. What once felt like a sweet resemblance between father and son had grown into something more complex. Robert wasn't becoming his father, he was becoming himself. But the similarities were impossible to miss, and Terri felt every single one of them. There's an easy version of Robert Irwin's story, the one where he becomes famous simply because of who he is, the son of a legend doing just enough to carry the name forward. People would have accepted that without question, but he didn't choose that path. Instead, he built something of his own, while still respecting everything that came before him. By his early teens, he was already appearing regularly on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, bringing exotic animals on stage and handling them with a calm confidence that kept surprising viewers. He wasn't performing, he wasn't leaning on his last name. What people saw was real. His excitement, his knowledge, even his humor. It all felt natural, and that's why audiences connected with him so quickly. His passion for conservation didn't sound like a rehearsed message. It felt like something he truly lived every day. And then there was his photography. What started as a personal interest turned into something much bigger. Robert began creating powerful wildlife images that were displayed in galleries around the world. In 2020, he won first place in a major wildlife photography competition with a photo of an Australian forest destroyed by bushfires. The image wasn't just visually impressive, it carried emotion. It made people feel something before they could even fully process what they were looking at. When Terri saw that photograph, she understood immediately. Robert wasn't just taking pictures, he was telling a story. Quietly, through his work, he was showing people why nature matters, why it's worth protecting, without needing to say a single word. Out of nowhere, something unexpected stepped in, Dancing with the Stars. And just like that, everything began to change. When Robert Irwin joined season 34, no one could have predicted what was coming next. What followed wasn't just entertaining, it was deeply emotional in a way the show hadn't seen in years. Each week, he didn't just dance, he told a story. There was something real in the way he moved, something people could feel without it being explained. The judges noticed it, the audience felt it. Even the people behind the scenes were caught off guard by how powerful it became. At just 21, he stood in front of millions for the very first time. Calm, honest, and somehow still full of surprises. But beneath all of that, something bigger was quietly happening. Without making a big announcement about it, Robert was stepping out of a shadow he'd lived in his entire life. For the first time, he wasn't being seen as the son of Steve Irwin. He was simply Robert. And once people noticed that shift, they couldn't unsee it. That kind of change isn't small. Growing up with a name like his meant living under constant comparison. Every moment, every appearance, every word, all measured against someone he lost before he could even truly remember him. It's the kind of pressure that usually pushes people to either hide or pretend. But Robert did neither. Instead of shrinking, he became clearer. Instead of copying, he became original. You could see it in the details. The way he spoke about conservation wasn't built on memories of his father. It was grounded in facts, urgency, and what was happening right now. Through his own camera, he showed the real-time loss of wildlife and habitats. He didn't ask people to care because of legacy. He asked them to care because it matters now. That difference, moving from memory to action, was entirely his own. And quietly, in the background, Terri Irwin had been waiting for this moment, while also fearing it might never come. When it finally did, when the world saw him clearly, the same way she always hoped they would, the emotion was overwhelming. Then came the night everything broke open. On October 14th, 2025, the show aired Dedication Night, where each contestant honored someone who shaped their life. Robert chose his mother. Even before the dance began, something felt different. In the pre-performance video, he struggled to speak. Not for effect, this wasn't performance. His voice caught, his composure slipped. He was trying to hold it together, but the emotion was real. He spoke about losing his father at just 2 years old, and as he grew older, he began to understand what that loss truly meant, not just for him, but for his mother. She had carried everything. Running a zoo, raising 2 children in the public eye, protecting a legacy while quietly dealing with grief most people never saw. He explained that at every important moment in his life, every time he wished his father could be there, she was the one who showed up. And for him, that was enough. He could barely finish the sentence. Sitting in the audience, Terri was already in tears before the music even started. The performance that followed, a contemporary routine, wasn't just choreography. It was a story about strength, sacrifice, and love, about what a mother gives and what a son understands as he grows. When the final note faded, Robert didn't wait. He walked straight off the floor and wrapped his arms around her. Bindi Irwin rushed in to join them, and for a moment, the 3 of them stood together holding on to each other in the middle of the ballroom. The room fell silent. Then it erupted. Even the judges struggled to speak. One mentioned Steve watching over them. Another, who had once danced with Bindi years earlier, couldn't finish his thoughts through the tears. For a brief moment, it didn't feel like a competition anymore. It felt like something much deeper. Later, Terri describes the moment in her usual quiet way. Instead of focusing on her feelings, she spoke about what she saw. She said it felt like seeing Steve again, and at the same time, seeing Robert exactly as he is. Both truths held together. She later shared that it was a night she would never forget, not just because of the dance, but because of the person her son had become. The response from the public was instant. The clip spread everywhere, touching people far beyond the show itself. But that wasn't the only moment that stayed with people. On November 11th, the anniversary of Steve's passing, Robert returned to the stage. This time, he performed a foxtrot alongside Bindi. The song carried history. Bindi had once used it herself years earlier to honor their father. As they danced, old footage of Robert as a child with Steve played across the floor, past and present, side by side. And once again, the room felt it. By the time the music stopped, Robert was already crying. The judges didn't hesitate. They gave him a perfect score. In the days after, he opened up about that moment. To him, his father's legacy wasn't something heavy to carry. It was more like a guide, a path. He said everything he does feels connected to his dad in some way. And through it all, Terri was watching. Every dance, every second. Each time, her reaction never really changed. For a woman who had spent nearly 20 years holding everything together for everyone else, there were moments where it all slipped. Just a little, but enough to see. Because this wasn't just her son performing on a stage. This was something deeper. It was the result of years of quiet effort, of strength no one really saw. There's a kind of loneliness that comes with being the parent who stays behind. You carry your grief in silence because you're also carrying your children, and they can't see you break. Not fully, not in the way you sometimes need to. Terri lived like that for years. People called it strength, but the truth is, it was survival. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart, so she never did. But something changed. Watching Robert step onto that stage week after week, doing something remarkable with everything he had been through, that was different. For the first time in a long while, Terri didn't have to be the one holding everything up. Someone else was strong now. And without even realizing it, that was the moment she had been waiting for. Then came the finale. By November 25th, 2025, the conversation around Robert had completely shifted. He was no longer just known as the crocodile hunter's son doing well on a TV show. He had become the story people were watching. The pressure was already high, but behind the scenes, there was more. In the days leading up to the finale, it came out that Robert had been dancing through real pain. He had strained the muscles between his ribs, an injury that made even simple movement hurt. His partner shared in an interview that parts of the routine had quietly been adjusted to help him manage it. Still, Robert chose not to make it a big deal. When asked about it, he didn't frame it as sacrifice. To him, it was a decision, a simple one. Stopping wasn't an option he wanted to consider. That small detail said a lot. It showed how he was raised. It showed what happens when you grow up watching someone, like his mother, carry more than they should and keep going anyway. Not for attention, but because it had to be done. On the night of the finale, Robert and his partner performed 3 routines. With each one, the energy in the room kept building. By the time they reached their final freestyle, the crowd was already on its feet before the scores even came in. One of the judges called it near perfect and meant every word. That night didn't just feel big, it was big. The voting numbers proved it too. Tens of millions of votes came in within just a few hours, one of the most intense finales the show had seen in years. When the final result was revealed, Robert Irwin was crowned the season 34 champion, standing in the same winner spot his sister Bindi Irwin had claimed 10 years earlier. That full circle moment hit everyone in the room. But for Terri Irwin, it meant something even deeper. Not long after the win, Robert sat down for a TV interview that quickly spread everywhere. What stood out wasn't just the victory, it was what he said about his mom. Speaking from the heart, he opened up about everything she carried after Steve Irwin passed away, running Australia Zoo, raising 2 kids in the public eye, staying strong for a global conservation mission while dealing with personal loss. As he spoke, you could feel the weight behind his words. He admitted that just thinking about what she went through made him emotional. Then he said something simple but powerful. She was extraordinary. He believed people had underestimated her from the very beginning. And the most powerful part? He truly understood it. Not just as a son, but as someone who had been quietly watching, learning, and growing all those years. His biggest achievement wasn't the trophy, the fame, or the awards. It was his awareness, his gratitude, his ability to recognize the sacrifices that built the life he stands in today. As Terri watched that moment unfold, something shifted. Maybe for the first time, she allowed herself to fully accept it. She had done more than just survive. She hadn't only protected a legacy or held her family together. She had raised someone strong enough to carry it forward with clarity, strength, and heart. That realization, that's where the tears truly came from. Years ago, Steve once shared a dream to one day step back and trust the next generation to continue the mission, to know he had done enough. He never got that chance. He passed away at just 44, leaving behind a young family and a responsibility that suddenly fell on Terri's shoulders. And yet, years later, here stands Robert, grown, grounded, and ready. A young man who turned loss into purpose, who refused to let pressure define him, who transformed a powerful name into something that lifts him instead of weighing him down. Terri held everything together long enough for this moment to happen. And now that it has, the truth is clear. It cost her a lot, but it was worth it. In the end, this isn't just a story about winning a trophy. It's about resilience, legacy, and the quiet strength it takes to raise someone who sees, understands, and continues the mission. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't the one the world applauds. It's the one a mother sees in her child.